When will Washington be hiring a defensive coordinator? Should be announced soon.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Rahim Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He writes inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over at Huskies Wire. Make sure you check out all of our written work. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now, new customers. If you join today, you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Lars, we've gotten a lot of questions from the everydayers about the defensive coordinator position. So we'll probably get to a name or two that was rumored to be out there, but I wanted to start off this episode with a pretty hot take where, and this is a theory. I ran it by our good buddy Ben Glassmeyer a little bit earlier today, and he gave me this very enthralled look, which I really enjoyed. Shout out to Ben. But one of the people that, when we talked to Jedd Fisch after his introductory press conference, in the little media breakout session that wasn't televised, but we got a lot of fantastic quotes from him and everything. One thing that he talked about, one person that he talked about working under is Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh did a really fantastic job of revamping his defense when he talked to his brother John about, just, hey, who are some guys that you think might need a break that can help me revamp my defense? And the two names that he was given were Mike Macdonald and Jesse Minter. Obviously, we saw how far not only Mike Macdonald's defense took the Ravens this year, but how well Jesse Minter's defense, which is basically the same thing, did for Michigan. So, my theory, Jedd Fisch, a former employee of Jim Harbaugh, said, hey, now that I have this gig and you're off to the NFL, is there anything that you can give me or your brother John might be able to do to help me out to find a defensive coordinator? Because with how long this has been put off, it almost feels like it has to be an NFL guy in some regard, where, we haven't heard any rumors outside of Sean Desai, who I'm sure you and I will talk about very briefly. But we just haven't heard a lot of rumors. And the more that we kind of dig into this, the more it just feels like, yeah, it's going to be somebody from the NFL level here.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, because you would think, especially as you're bringing on recruits and they have their big junior day coming up next week, in which I'm sure we'll talk more about just in general, but you would have to think, okay, John Richardson's kind of been doing the role of a defensive coordinator from a recruiting perspective over the last week and a half, right? So clearly it's going to be somebody tied in with the secondaries. And there's a couple names that maybe come to mind when you think of that, but to your point, I firmly agree. It has to be an NFL body, because at this point, even if you're looking at another college defensive coordinator, what would be the contractual holdup there? I mean, unless you're hiring somebody from Nick Saban's staff on Alabama, and Alabama is now playing hardball the other way, which of course is not the case. But I'm just saying, right, with that delay with the other coaches going there, that there's no way that it's not at least somebody currently in the NFL. But also, kind of that does get back to our original point of why wouldn't Brennan just hit up his dad to see if his dad has any other suggestions? And that could also be the case too, right? Where Jedd takes a look at who John suggests, who Jim suggests, who Pete suggests, and then kind of works down those lists. And if you think about it, it's probably a lot of guys in the NFL on that list. So Jedd is at least doing his due diligence. And if he's got to wait or do whatever, it's not, but probably should be clear about this. I don't think it's going to be Mike Macdonald, but maybe it's somebody off of his staff, right? Maybe not. But maybe it's his linebackers coach that would get a promotion to a defensive coordinator. And you're saying, hey, you're going down to college, but you're getting a promotion in a elevated role. And if you're Washington and Jedd Fisch, hey, we just got a coach off that Super Bowl winning defense, or that Super Bowl, clinching, a team going to the Super Bowl, right? So that. But you see, okay, it would be different than if you took.
Oh, I'm strictly talking about the Ravens aspect of it all and how they choked that game away. No, you're 100% right.
Right, but I'm just saying, in the sense of it's different than getting a lower level, you're not getting. I don't know, Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator, right? Somebody who's not, waiting around, and you're not hiring John Donovan 2.0. Let me make that clear.
So you bring up a great point there, and that's one of the reasons that when the Sean Desai thing was floated, the former Eagles defensive coordinator, I reached out to a good friend of mine who's a big Eagles fan, follows the team very closely. And as a Patriots fan, it hit really close to home. And the only thing he said to me in return was, keep in mind that they got rid of Sean Desai in favor of Matt Patricia. And I could fill 7 podcasts with my hatred of Matt Patricia and everything he's done that he did to ruin the Patriots, that he did to ruin the Lions. It is what it is. We don't need to go down that road. RIP to the Locked On Huskies, just bandwagon team of the Detroit Lions, by the way. But I'm really intrigued by that because it also brings up something that where you and I heard a little bit about it. We haven't necessarily gotten to go super far in depth on it, but Jedd Fisch held a meeting with a whole bunch of former Washington alumni, mainly former NFL players, over the last couple of nights. And he preached that this is going to be an NFL style program. What that means, there are a lot of minutia that you and I are probably unfamiliar with, but because, we didn't play in the NFL, but I know that's so shocking for everybody, but it's really interesting to see that because that would mean that not only with Jedd Fisch, who has all of his NFL connections, which is something he's talked to both you and I about, but that also just means that, some of these NFL guys where just whatever name it is you want to throw out there, just saying like, for example, the linebackers coach from the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, it's not too much of a difference going back down to college and then knowing I could still get a promotion in a couple of years because those coordinator jobs, especially, when we saw what we saw with Ryan Grubb, when it goes really well, they become such a hot commodity and such a well sought after name that it would be very easy to go get an NFL job once again after that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, and really all you're thinking about here, Jedd Fisch, is just get somebody who can set up a defense for a couple of years or even a year.
Right.
And you can kind of continue that on. I mean, that's basically what, Michigan would have done, had Jim Harbaugh not left, right? Hey, just plug in your defense. And then if you go back to the NFL, somebody else can come in, right? So you can kind of just keep that road. Because really it's all about what type of scheme you want to run, right? And that's, I think, kind of what I'm gleaning from the approach of Jedd Fisch is like, hey, look, this is the type of defense I want to run. This is the style of defense I want to run. Now I just need maybe a 1A, 2A, 3A list of coaches who, okay, if you go next year, somebody else can come in. And you can also coach some guys up, right? And you would imagine that maybe Armand Hawkins gets a full defensive role maybe in a year or two, right? Where there's a number of guys where you want just a year by year kind of progression to where you're setting yourself up. Same thing with why you would bring in Ryan Grubb or Brandon Carroll, right? Where it's like, hey, this is my offensive guy. We'll go 2 or 3 years, and then we'll maybe take that next step. But whoever is around you in those 2 years better be taking notes because you could be in the running to fill that position when they go on to a bigger and better job.
No, I agree with you there. And that's the nice thing where, because to that point, there's still, once a defensive coordinator is hired, there are still other position coaches that need to be filled out. The linebackers coach hasn't been filled out. And then whether it's an edge coach or a safety coach, whatever that 10th assistant coach role is going to be, that hasn't been filled out yet either. And it kind of feels like Jedd Fisch is waiting to get this defensive coordinator in place, whoever it might be. And then from that point on, we'll say, all right, are there any guys that you'd like to bring in to help fill these last couple of positions? And, maybe William Inge comes back as just the linebackers coach, or Chuck Morrell comes back as just a safeties coach and not a defensive coordinator / play caller, where, that's, and these are just options that you're throwing out there where maybe he says, okay, yeah, these guys have some level of familiarity with a lot of the guys in the room. So it'd be nice to have them around, but there are a whole lot of different options. Or this NFL coach can say, these are guys that I'm really high on. Let's bring them on. So there are a whole lot of different ways that this can be played, especially when you talk about the position of safety. Washington did just get a commit from Rahim Wright, and we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break. But first, we're going to send a message to our good friends over at FanDuel. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets, which is just some of the most fun. And one of my favorite yearly traditions is to write an article about whatever Husky might be in the Super Bowl that year and why they can win Super Bowl MVP. This year, it's going to be fun because it's first-team All-Pro cornerback Trent McDuffie, who I believe has plus 12,000 odds on FanDuel last I looked. So, hey, that might be a little bit of fun there. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So Lars, we'll talk some more about some high school guys, some college guys in this episode. We had a lot of fun with that on our Monday show. So if you didn't check that one out, please make sure you go give that a listen, because we went through all of the guys who were rumored to have been on campus this weekend, and some that, may have already committed and some that hadn't. And yeah, actually one guy we missed was Rahim Wright, because I don't believe he had opted out of his national letter of intent to Arizona, or at least had announced it by that point. But he did commit to Washington right as we were about to press record here on this Monday afternoon. And Lars, I just dove into the film on this kid, and I like him a lot. He looks like he's going to play safety at the next level, and I really like his eyes. He's got great vision. He's somebody who you can ask to come down and play man coverage every once in a while if need be, but he's just really smart, especially in run support. And he's listed 6 foot 175. So obviously he's going to need to add a little bit of weight there, but he's a really talented kid, and you can just see the football IQ is already really, really high. And then, with some time under John Richardson, he looks like he could be a really nice player.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I kind of thought a hybrid of Mish Powell and Josh Blair, right? Because he plays cornerback. Because I'm sure when you look at his film, he's not playing boundary cornerback. He's playing that kind of nickel slot cornerback. But his first one is the high safety role. So he's a guy that can play
a lot of high safety.
Right, but he can play multiple positions. But he's not a boundary cornerback. So when it says listed as a cornerback, it's like, okay, well, more of that nickel hybrid role. And I think that's perfect for what Washington needs in this class, right? Because with Joshua Lair asking out of his NLI at safety, now you kind of need a second body at safety, and maybe you could use a nickel, right? Because that's kind of where Lair was going to probably slot in, at least early on, probably one of those two positions. But he also reminds me a lot of Mish Powell in the run support role, right?
Sure.
When he's out at nickel, at least if he grows. I'm not saying he's a finished product right now, but I'm saying when he could get to that Mish Powell level is where I envision him. Where if he is a safety and stays there, let's go, perfect. If he comes down and kind of does a little bit of both. And that's why I'm intrigued to see how does Washington set up its defense, because that will kind of tell me more, well, do you need to, or can you even roll with a single high safety and have maybe 3 or 4 corners, in your dime packages, nickel packages, and things like that. But having all these talented bodies with long rangy abilities, and I don't know if you saw it, but I think he's got like a 23, 24-inch long jump or something like that.
Yeah, he's a good athlete.
Right. And so I think to me, like anytime you see plus 21 or 20 on the jump, like that tells me, okay, you can pretty much play him anywhere you want to in the defensive secondary. He'll be fine.
So you bring up a great point there. And one thing that I noticed when just kind of looking over his recruiting profile and everything is something that has been a tradition at Washington for a very long time, which is buying more into film and, just actual athleticism than just pure recruiting rankings, where and that's something where, credit to guys like Armand Hawkins, who you mentioned a little bit earlier, and some of the other guys who I know that that you could call it a front office, really just the recruiting office is not necessarily fully rounded out yet. But they do a really good job of talent identification, and especially with the situation that Arizona was in, they needed to be really good at that. And that was one of the really intriguing things about going out and hiring Jedd Fisch, was the ability to bring some of these guys like Armand Hawkins along with him, where this is a really nice example of just, I feel not necessarily in terms of every kind of player that Washington's going to recruit going forward, but just, rounding out your class with guys like Rahim Wright is going to be really intriguing. And, another former Arizona commit who it sounds like was on campus this weekend is offensive tackle Justin Hilkema, where I like this dude too, where Washington needs a lot of bodies along the offensive line. You can only add so many right now, like we talked about yesterday with Landon Hatchett, where, after Gearin Hatchett officially committed to Oklahoma, right now it kind of seems like it's down to getting Paki Finau out of the transfer portal, just getting him to withdraw his name, and bringing in somebody like Justin Hilkema, where that's just kind of where you're at this point. And then you look at whatever's going to be coming down the pipe in the spring portal and just kind of save it for then, where you can give especially if you can get these guys to come back, you can give some of these true and redshirt freshmen a lot more reps over the course of spring ball.
Right, exactly. And you do have David Buyajian still coming in June, and
Right.
I don't believe he's outside of his NLI yet. I would be surprised if he did, just all things considered. Maybe he is a long-term developmental prospect. But to your point, I do honestly think the more that I think about it, if you get like Zach Henne, all those guys, a lot of Elijah Jaquette, some reps, you can really start to see where those guys are at, because the room is very limited in terms of experience, but very high in upside. Like you still got to add bodies to that room. But if I just showed you on paper what the offensive line room looks like, okay, this looks ugly right now, like in 24, but 25, 26, 27, we're looking pretty good. So if you can just get enough bodies in after spring ball to survive this season and not be Colorado, you're in great shape moving forward, because Zach Henne got a lot of playing time last year. Jalen Clem got a lot of playing time last year. Sam Peacock was, hit or miss, but got some playing time last year. Getting Landon, without question, big upgrade there. So big retention there. So the offensive line still has got a ways to go, but I do think, to your point, if you can kind of see how far Jaquette and those guys progressed, then maybe the position doesn't look as dire as it does going into spring ball.
No, I agree with you there. And then, so last thing we kind of wanted to hit on this topic is, because again, as we record this, we talked a lot about Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis on yesterday's show, where we're not going to go through their whole film and our thoughts on all of them again. But with BJ Green officially announcing that he's going to Colorado today, it feels like that opens up the spot for one more pass rusher, where it felt like maybe yesterday, and it almost feels like the coaching staff knew this was coming and been planning on it for a little while. But now that there are multiple spots available, you can go out and take both of those guys and find a way to make it work and find some different packages to make sure you can utilize them all and keep them happy, because both Davis and Ward were able to find ways to produce at Arizona. And then, like as we talked about yesterday, Maurice Himes, Jacob Lane, Lance Holtzclaw, Anthony James, you can find ways to still mix them in and make sure everybody is happy in the rotation. And while there's still a lot of untapped potential in that room, it's a good way of sorting it all out. We're saying, all right, we're going to give all these guys a whole lot of reps and just see who shines.
Yep, exactly. I think that, again, the old cliche of just cream rises to the top. It's just want, because there is a certain level where you can't have the minimum number of bodies at the position, but then you also don't want to just be taking every John and Harry just for the sake of taking them, right? So taking a handful of former Arizona players and then waiting for those extra spots, because there's guys that are not in the portal right now that are going to be in the portal in April, right? And so it's worth waiting for some of those higher end guys than trying to just kind of take and fill from your Arizona roster and just kind of almost purchase the Arizona football roster and bring it to Washington. If you like, you don't necessarily want to do that, but you do want to take some of the better players off that team, and that's where Davis and the other
and
one
Ward.
And Ward. That was like for some reason I'm blanking on that name. I heard like Isaiah, but then I definitely did not have the Ward name coming into my head. I had a different last name, and I'm like, I know it's not him. So
could have said Wagner and still, technically been correct. So
fair.
But yeah, no. So it's interesting just to see how that position is going to work out, and it's that rounds out that position. But then you're still going to need a whole lot on the interior, where Sebastian Valdez, Armand Parker, Javon Parker, Elenius Davis, Jacob Bandes. Right now, that's not going to be enough. Where you need, whether it just be a productive pass rusher like what Valdez could be, or just a big Tupuola-Fetui style run stuffer. You need at least one more guy in that room, probably two. We'll see how it works out. And I feel like if they do go after just one of those guys, it might signal that, hey, yeah, we're really high on, Armand Parker's development, what we've seen from him so far. So I feel like there's a whole lot to get to there, but we're going to save that for another day, because Lars, I'm really excited to talk about some draft. Right after we send a message to our good friends over at Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if any of my friends or family, or just any of their friends or family members got sick while on a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication they need. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jase Medical. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics, treat a long list of bacterial illnesses. And, this stuff could happen to any of us. So it's something like that it's so helpful. You can visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a licensed board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, Lars. So some big news out of Frisco, Texas today, as our good friend and one of my writers over at Huskies Wire, Alex Katzen, spoke with Zion Tupuola-Fetui, who said that he suffered a shoulder tear in the spring. And that's something that he played through the entire season, was able to play 14 out of the 15 games for the Huskies this year, but he's going to have shoulder surgery on it. He's going to have surgery on that shoulder this week, and that's probably going to keep him out until July. And I feel like this is just going to be a really interesting discussion for his draft stock, which is, really fluctuated over the last couple of years, starting so high in 2020, the Achilles in 2021, just kind of takes it way back down and has really bounced around since then.
Yeah, unfortunately, we both love Zion. So I think, but the way that his kind of style of pass rush has kind of been opposite of Braylon Trice, he was always going to be in that kind of day 3 role where it's going to be 5th, 6th, 7th. So I think maybe this might knock him down to 6th or 7th, but I still think there's enough potential in that, as long as teams are comfortable enough with the medical, right? I think, some guys, they put off surgeries and it ends up catching up to him, right? So it's good for Zion that he was able to put it off enough to where it wouldn't impact him. Maybe he has to go undrafted, but I do think there's going to be enough teams that will see, okay, we see the high end potential. We can take you as a day 3 pick. And if it doesn't work out, so be it. Right. Because there's enough, I think there's enough talent with him and enough athleticism with him. Think about four-sport athlete, right? Volleyball, basketball. Yeah. So there's enough potential with Zion. If you're an NFL team, to say, okay, we could take you with our 6th or 7th round pick. It's not great money, but you'll at least get somewhat of a guaranteed contract or get, a chance to earn your right in training camp and maybe work through the injury. We've seen teams plenty of times take guys that, hey, you know what? He might not play the entire season, but we're going to take him with a 2nd round pick. If you already got to play a day 3 pick, I don't think it's that much of an ask.
No, I agree with you there, where it kind of felt like that's where his stock was going to be anyways. So I don't know how much this necessarily moves it. It just doesn't give him the opportunity to go out and test at, an event like the Combine or at the Pro Day, where he can still interview and that can still help him out. Or, I kind of want to talk about Jack Westover in the same light, where he's somebody who I'm really intrigued to see what happens with his draft stock. But with ZTF, he's probably going to be a rotational edge rusher just for the most part, come his time in the NFL. Because that's just kind of what we saw him be his best at Washington, where, probably not going to play close to 280 like he did during the COVID year, where he just went on that just rampage, had 7 sacks in 3 games, really. So I don't know how much this is necessarily going to hurt him, but it's definitely not going to help things in the same way. And, you can definitely see him go to somewhere where he can even play just as outside linebacker in a standard 3-4 defense and just be asked to rush the passer and not do a whole lot else. But that's one of the reasons we want to just have some draft talk is Jack Westover in that same light, where he was one of 3 guys we saw get an invitation to the Combine. And of the 3 who have accepted their invitation so far, being Jalen Polk, Westover, and Devin Culp, I feel that Jack Westover has the most to gain from it, where I think that Devin Culp will probably be the biggest takeaway in terms of those 3 guys, in terms of his testing numbers. But I think that Jack Westover has the most to gain because we just saw him be a little bit more consistent when it came to catching the ball throughout his time in college. And he's got really good athleticism. We know that. And getting him in the interview room where, outside of the top couple of guys in this class, mainly Georgia's Brock Bowers and Texas' JT Sanders, there's a lot of room for movement at the tight end position, where I don't necessarily think that Jack is going to move into a day 2 pick, but I think he's the kind of guy where he gets taken in that Cade Otton range early on day 3 and can be somebody who's really productive at the NFL level for a long time.
Right. Well, because that's the thing, is that he's not as big as Cade, right? Not as muscly as some of the other guys, but he's a football guy. And I know that's a cliche, right? But it's almost a weird thing. Well, yeah, he plays so well. Of course he's a football guy. It's like, yeah. But look at every play that Jack Westover made this year. It was just a gritty, hey, you have your All-American receivers, you have all this and that, and yet you got the scrawny white tight end just kind of reaching, doing the Superman poses, trying to haul in some of these howitzers from Penix. And so I've always kind of been hopeful that Westover would get a chance in the NFL because he deserves it. And I think, the way that he's put in the work this past season as a blocker, and he could play on special teams as well. Like, he's a guy that just, to me, wants a chance, right? Kind of a guy, hey, if I can earn my chance to get to the NFL, almost like Drew Sample, right? Maybe a little smaller than Drew, right? Just from a bulky perspective, but not that much different, right? And we saw Drew Sample go in the second round a few years back. So there's plenty of opportunity for, I think Devin honestly will find a spot too as well, more for athleticism.
Absolutely.
So I think his hindrance is going to be blocking, which it got better. But I think
I was going to say, I think he's gotten a lot better as a blocker.
No, but I'm not saying if there is a knock on Culp, it's the blocking. It can still get better, but of the two, because Westover is probably the better blocker of the two, but it certainly got a lot better for Culp. And so that's why I think Culp, again, like Westover, earned himself a combine invite. Like, if he didn't have that growth in the blocking, and as a result, more playing time and what he was able to do this past season, I don't think Culp gets an invite. So again, to your point, I agree that he's gotten better, but again, you're playing in the NFL, so you got to get even better.
Right. And that's where I would say that Culp has the most to gain of those three guys too, where we've seen him be a little bit inconsistent with his hands. And I feel like that even might be a bigger knock than his blocking. It's all right. Well, outside of 2023, we've seen you have a lot of drops, and for somebody playing tight end, that's something that can't happen, especially when we want you to be a security blanket. And he's somebody who I feel like you can, I don't want to say design an offense around him, but you can design a couple of plays for a two tight end package where Devin Culp is the target, where, it might be some kind of tunnel screen like we saw Ryan Grubb like to do. And he's somebody, because once he gets in space, he's got fantastic athleticism in the open field, and you can utilize him in a whole bunch of different ways where you're right. We did see his blocking get a whole lot better, and it's already more than serviceable, where, I don't know if he's going to be the guy that you look at in 3, 4, 5 years and say, yeah, that's the starting tight end, where, look at what the Seahawks do, where you got Will Dissly, you have Colby Parkinson now, and you got Noah Fant as well, where you don't necessarily look at any of those three guys and say that they're head and shoulders above the rest. And unless you talk about physically with Colby Parkinson, where he's 6'7", but, you can look at him in one of those systems that utilize two tight ends, where the Eagles did for a while with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert, where you can look at him in that kind of system. And the Cowboys being another really good example, where they utilize 2 different 3 tight ends on a whole lot of different plays. And he's somebody who would thrive in that kind of offense, in my opinion.
Exactly. And I think that you hit the nail on the head of the right there at the end. It's which type of offense are you going to? One where you got to be a multiple blocking in line tight end, or a guy where you can honestly just split out and say, hey, you know what, you're our 3-4 catch a game guy, right? We're not going to ask you to block, we're just going to ask you to catch. And I think that, and to your point, with his hands getting so much better this past season, but the history of drops still being there, it's like, all right, you know what? Well, if you can be a blocker, great. We just want you to be a split out tight end. Just go be like, and that's really what he came out of Spokane Prep as, was an athlete, a running back, wide receiver, who then converted to play tight end. So I think if he can get back to those roots and just kind of be more of an out and out tight end versus not having to block. So I was like, out and out, I'm trying to get there.
You got there.
But it not being as much of a traditional tight end, then I think that actually will be better for him in the immediate future. And then you can bring in the pass blocking and kind of make that career last longer as he goes down the line.
No, I agree with you there. And then the last thing that I really want to make sure we hit on in this one is Dillon Johnson, where he's somebody we haven't necessarily discussed him a ton, where it appears he's going to be healthy come time for the NFL Combine. And this is a dude who he's probably going to get picked on day 3 with just the way running back draft value is. And, this isn't necessarily the strongest running back class, where I think day 2 there's going to be a really, really big run on the position, and he might get pushed up that high, based on his production and some other things that we've seen, but it's probably going to be an early day 3 guy. But I have a feeling that, when we look back at this running back draft class, there's going to be a few year period where Dillon Johnson is somebody who's getting a really heavy workload in the NFL, because you and I were both really impressed by what he was able to do this season. Even, as you so vocally pushed for all year long, getting more reps as a pass catcher, where we can see him do a little bit more of that at the NFL level. And as I was thinking about this the other day, I thought of a really fun fit for him. I think he'd be fantastic with the Houston Texans.
I can see that. Yeah. And he's got a young quarterback there. And I think the important thing with Dillon Johnson to remember is he's also a very capable pass blocker, right? Picking up that extra rusher. And so I think, and again, I've heard him agree he should have had way more targets than he did this past season. But I will say that his ability as a pass blocker kind of maybe took away some of those reps. And what could CJ Stroud use, especially as a young quarterback? Another good blocker. So I think that would be a perfect fit where you can also take those wheel routes from CJ, kind of do a few different things. But yeah, he's going to be in an offense. I mean, Dillon's going to find a way to make it in the NFL. Just because, I mean, look at what he did this season. One of the leading rushers in the Pac-12 on one leg. Like, it's like, so to me, and you know this as well as anybody, that kid will play through anything. So I think the fact that he's not totally like worn down from an injury perspective, right? I mean, teams are going to say, hey, you kind of got hurt a few times, but I also played through it and I pushed through it and I succeeded and I also showed out when I played hurt. So it's not like I was a detriment to my team. I was kind of the reason why my team got to where it did towards the end of the season, if we're being real.
Right. No, and that's a good point, because that's a great place to wrap up on, where, he goes into the national championship game with a foot injury and a knee injury, and then suffers an ankle injury. And he played through it, and he didn't necessarily play very well in that game, but we've seen the toughness from him time and time and time again. And he's somebody who, when you look at this running back draft class, where I feel like some of the guys that are going to shine just name-wise are like Bucky Irving at Oregon, Marshawn Lloyd at USC, Texas's Jonathan Brooks, Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, where those are all really talented dudes. I think they're going to have a really nice future. But Dillon Johnson is going to be the one where you look at him and you say, oh yeah, he's also in this draft class, and he can be really, really productive in the right scheme, especially. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Please feel free to like the video, leave us a comment down below. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review. It all really does help the show out. Thank you so much for tuning in.